This week's mimer is the mimer of Shir Hashirim, the first mimer in Likkutei Torah Shir Hashirim. I'm going to change this video for a second, if this is better. Okay. And so the mimer begins with the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Shir Hashirim, which is actually two psukim. The first pasuk is, this is the Song of Songs of Shlomo. Yashekeini minashikis pihu, and you should kiss me, or please kiss me from the kisses of your mouth. Tovim dodecha miyoyin, and I'll translate it as many of the mefarshim, that the ava that you showed us, the dodecha, lashon ava, that the ava that you showed us is greater than wine. And so we know that the Shlomo here refers to the Eibush there, and so the Alter Rebbe begins in a noida. It's known that the Eibishter is called Chosson, and the Bnei Yisrael or Knesset Yisrael is called Kallah, and this is because of the nafshecha of an hashpaah of Torah to the Yidden. And as the Alter Rebbe brings our proof from the pasuk B'yem Chasu, the Maimer Azal, B'yem Chasunasai Zeh Matan Torah, that the day of the Eibishter's Chasana is a day of Matan Torah. And so therefore we see Matan Torah as a time of a chasana, which is like Chosson and Kallah. And that's why a person who's mesameach, a chosson, is dodecha to Torah that was given with hey koilos, as it says in the psukim that there was 5 koilos by Matan Torah. So the Alter Rebbe explains that chosson is the idea of chayis darga, to go down a level, which is to draw down in Sof, to come down in Torah. So there's the Eibishter coming down, the chosson. Here we're talking about that the Eibishter is called the Chosson, Kadosh Baruch Hu. We'll see later that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a certain level of Elikus, or a certain revelation of the Eibishter. But that is the level of Chosson, of Chayz Darga, that comes down into Torah, that it gets revealed. The Eibishter gets revealed through Torah, and that's called Chosson, Chayz Darga, that the Eibishter comes down through Torah. And then Knesset Yisrael is the marker of all Neshamas Yisrael. And he adds, and also of every nitzutz, every spark of a Yid, in particular, is a level of Kallah. So the Alter Rebbe explains that in Kallah there's 2 explanations. The first one, he says, Meloshin kiloyin, shemechala umevala hakoil, which means to destroy, to expire, to get rid of everything. In other words, somebody's koiches go out, they expire, they so to speak, you used up all your koiches, you have nothing left. So that is mechala, mekaloyin, it destroys, it gets rid of. And he says this is the lashon of Kallah, as he says upon the psukim in the brackets, Kallah she'eri, and the targum there is ishtetza, which means to destroy. In other words, I have nothing left of my gashmius, nothing left of me. I'm totally worn out. And he says that the word Kallah, it would be similar to the word of like daka. He also says raka or zaka, which daka, like we say, daka mina daka. It has to be the refined of the refined, which means it's a lashon pu'ula. It's a lashon of this is the way it's done. This is the way it has to happen. It's a verb. So Kallah would mean, or Kallah would mean shemachala. It destroys. It gets rid of everything. Okay. So he said the second lashon of Kallah is from the word kol sanafshi, which means you thirst, a chukka of the nefesh, a desire. That means that you want to become connected with the Eibishter. And he says this is a targum yonason there to ivas nafshi, which is a term of chukka, that you have a desire and a thirst, you could call it, to your husband. It says vel ishech teshukasech. And so we have these 2 levels of Kallah. One is Kallah meaning total self-nullification, that the self is gone. And the second one is fakert. The self has a great desire. It's a desire to the Eibishter. So he says, and he explains that the idea here is that we find in Krias Shemah that there's 2 levels of Mesiras Nefesh. The first one is to be nice with nefesh be'echad. When you say the word Echad, it says you have Mesiras Nefesh. The second one is v'ahavta b'chol nafshecha, and Chacham said afilu naitos nafshecha, even if he takes your soul, which is the second level of Mesiras Nefesh. And so to understand the difference, what are these two and what's the difference between them? And even more, after we have at the beginning of Shema, we have Yahavta, Hashem lekach b'chol levavcha, you shall love Hashem with all your heart. Which, this comes after the Mesiras Nefesh of Echad. In other words, you already said Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And at that Echad, as we said, you gave up your entire everything. Echad, meaning nothing else. The Eibishter Alein and Mesiras Nefesh. So how could you have afterwards Ava, which Ava is based on Kihu Chayacha, that you love something because it's your life, because it's you. There is no you at this point. So in other words, that Mesiras Nefesh, to throw your life away, which is total bittul b'metzias to the Ein Sof Mamish, that is the level of Echad. So how, after you reach this level, could you have the idea of Ahavta of Yesh Misha'ayev? So the Alter Rebbe explains that the first level of being Meiser Nefesh by Echad, that's because of Shema Yisrael, meaning that you have a understanding, a hisbaininus in the greatness of the Eibishter, how the Eibishter is one before the world was created, and the Eibishter is Rishon and Achirein, and as he uses it, the Lashon here, Umibalodai Ein Elikim. This is very important because he'll translate Umibalodai Ein Elikim in two different ways. First, he'll translate it here that there is no Elikim. Other than the Eibishter, there's nothing. There's no Elikim B'chlal. In other words, the Elikim, which generally Elikim means Mailim, Hamailim Umaster, that which conceals, Hatava, etc., that it's not Mailim Umaster to the Eibishter. To the Eibishter, there's no, before the Eibishter, there's no Helam and Hester whatsoever. Because everything by the Eibishter is like nothing. And therefore, there's no concealment B'chlal. And that's the reason why it says, V'loi Sechalalu. Hashem Kachi. The main thing is that you should not make a Mokim Chol, an empty space of the Eibishter, because everything is connected with the Eibishter. Even Elikim is a Yiskalus of the Eibishter. There's no concealment before him. And the fact that you were to make something that feels separate, that itself means that there's something nifrid mimenu chas v'shalom. And in this situation, where there's nothing other than the Eibishter whatsoever, everything is bittul. Your yeshes, and yourself, and your ego, anything done for yourself. And that's the Kallah Malashon Kiloyin, that it totally destroys self. Anything that's for you, yourself, all your own ritzaynus, and all you have left is the ratzon to the Eibishter himself. Okay, and he brings down in the Chatzi Igul that this is a little bit what it says by Parshas Kiseitze, that your Nekuda Pnimius Halev becomes totally one in the Ein Sof, and even Ganei Natachnik and Na'elyon, you give it all up. All you want is the Eibishter alone, as it says, Mili B'Shamayim, Kallah She'edi. I want nothing other than the Eibishter himself. Total, everything is bittul, mavuttul, your whole self. You don't want anything. You want just the Eibishter, one with the Eibishter. Okay. Now the second level of Kallah is Mulashon Kol Sanafshi, that again we said is a chukka, an ava, which this is a level of bittul hayesh, that you don't lose your sense of self, but actually your actual self is dedicated to the Eibishter. In other words, at be'emes, you're a yesh v'davar. Only you're mevatel yourself, that you want to become totally one within the Eibishter. And that's the reason why we have a hefsek between these two levels of Mesiras Nefesh, by saying, in other words, between Echad and Chol nafshecha with Baruch Shem Mechusay Elam Vod, which this is the level of Likkutei Torah. In other words, the level of Echad is Likkutei Torah. The level of Baruch Shem Mechusay, the level of Malchus, this is already the level of Likkutei Torah. And from the level of Malchus, all creations come about from Ayin Liyesh. In other words, that they become Yesh from the Ayin. They become something from nothing. And the reason is because a Melech B'Layam, that the level of Malchus itself only exists when there's an Am, when there's things that are separate and dimmed and totally, in our case, things of self. In other words, therefore Malchus is the Makar and the source for all Nivrei. And therefore he teaches here now the other way, Mibaladai Ein Elikim, that only Mibaladai. In other words, that outside of Havaya, outside of the Eibishter, there's no Elikim. But within the Eibishter, in other words, Havaya itself is Elikim. As it says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, the Eibishter himself, who's mitzamtzim and conceals the Ohr, that has no limit, that it should be able to come down in a revealed way for Nivroim, in a way of Yesh, as he brings a turtle that has its shell, its garments are made of itself. In other words, that the Hester of Elikus is from the Gilui of Elikus itself. In other words, that your creation of Yesh is also a creation of the Eibishter that he wants. And from this level of Baruch Shem Mechusay Leilam Vad, you could have a hafta of Yesh Misha Oyev, that there's an ego and a self that loves the Eibishter. On the other hand, Yichudei Law is totally bittul mamish, and the Echad, total, there's no self left. There's no sense of self left. And he says this is why you could have Yahafta after the Mesiras Nefesh of Echad. It's the answer to the question. Because you say Baruch Shem Mechusay Leilam Vad, which the Baruch Shem Mechusay Leilam Vad is the lowering to a lower level of Yehuda Tata, and therefore, in that level, you could already have Mesiras Nefesh. V'ahafta, you could have a Yesh Mishayev. I think it brings on the Maimer of Chanukah, B'chafei B'Kislev, a little bit different. I think there it speaks there about that one is Mitzad Nefesh and the Neshama, and one is Mitzad the Guf. But he says, it's Oila B'Kana Echad, because ultimately the Avodah of the Neshama is generally more of Avodah of Yechudei Law, and the Avodah down here in the Guf is more Avodah of Yehuda Tata and Nefesh Bahamas. And so it has a similarity in this idea that that's the level of the Ava of Echad, there's the Ava of the Neshama, and then the Mesiras Nefesh of Echad, the Mesiras Nefesh of the Neshama, and the level here is the Mesiras Nefesh of the Guf. Bilchal, I think this is a story of, I think the Ruzhiner asked the Alter Rebbe this question about Echad and how there could be V'ahafta and the two levels. How could there be V'ahafta after the Mesiras Nefesh of Echad, and why there's a second Mesiras Nefesh afterwards? This is the answer to that question when he was a kid. This was brought down, and I think also in Shesh Mitzvah Tefillah. Anyway, so he says that these two levels are called in the term of Kabbalah Shchintei Ilah and Shchintei Tata. And he says these are two levels of Kallah that it's said in Shir Hashirim, which the whole Shir Hashirim, he says, speaks about two levels of Kallah. High one, and because it says two times in Shir Hashirim the love between a Chosson and Kallah, and so it refers to these two levels of Kallah, which is Shchintei Ilah and Shchintei Tata, as he's saying here, is the higher and lower levels of Kallah. In other words, one is a Kallah, a Malchus says it's totally bittul to the Eibishter, or Bina, but B'Shchintei Ilah, and Shchintei Tata would be as Malchus comes itself, or it comes out into Biyah, which doesn't say here clearly which way it is, but these are the two levels generally of the higher Shechina and the lower Shechina, and one is totally bittul, and one is a Yesh that's nisbattul. Okay, so he says, I think actually, I don't know if we could cut this. Okay, whatever. I don't want to, the level of Malchus being Shchinta Tata. Okay, we'll see. Well, maybe. I don't want to. I'm thinking it through again. I don't want to take the last piece as Torah Messina. Okay, so he said these two levels of Kallah, they bring about two levels of Chosson, which is Chayz Darga. Meaning each one draws down another level of Gilui Elikus. And this is where he says Kol Mitzalis Chassanim Mechupasam, that there's Chassanim, there's two Chassanim, and this is what he says. He'll first bring us out from what we say in davening, Melech Meshubach U'Mefayar Adiyat Shmei Agadol, that the Eibishter as Melech is praised forever. In other words, we praise his name forever. So now when we see his name is connected with Melech, and that it's forever, but he's going to go here and speak about what is the idea of Shmei Agadol. What's that big name, a small name? And also, what does it mean that until the world was created, there was just the Eibishter, who Shmei Bovad? How could there be a shame, which means a level of some type of revelation before the world was created, and there's nobody to even call him with his name? So what does that mean? So he says, it's known that the Eibishter is called in the Gemara and the Midrashim the name of Kadosh Baruch Hu. And why do they choose this name and not any other name? Like Rachum Chanon, because Kadosh shows that the Eibishter is separated. In other words, that the Eibishter is totally above the realm and separated from bringing godliness into the world, and it's almost like a one drop from the whole sea, from all the oceans. That's the erech, even worse, because that's a fil ba'erech. This is more than not ba'erech. She says this is why it says the Eibishter sits, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits and is involved in Oisik b'Torah. What does it mean? Meaning that the Eibishter, Tzmusa Yisbarich, which is Kadosh Shemuvah, the Eibishter, as he is removed and beyond the world, he's Taka Kadosh, he's to separate. But what does he do? He lowers himself. He sits down that he could come down into Torah as somebody who lowers his entire stature by sitting down. And when the Eibishter comes down in such a way, it's called shame, which means it's a ray, it's a revelation, a shine. And so in the Ha'ara here, he says that be'etzem, by the way it is, by the Eibishter, it's not only that there's a actual shame, it's just a yechelis for a shame. In other words, the shame goes on this the ability that when the Eibishter wants to shine his name and reveal himself, that it will actually happen. Because he compares this a little bit to the ray of the sun that's in the sun, that's totally in the sun, and it has nothing of itself. It's just part of the sun. But by the sun, it has to be there. In other words, the sun has to shine, not by choice. Masha'enkein, when we're talking about in the Nimshal, it's a whole different way that the Eibishter only chooses to shine his light. So the fact that the Ohr, the shame that's there, is basically the yechelis, that when he wants to shine and he wants to reveal himself, he could. And this is what he's called Shmei HaGadol, which is higher than Ishtarshalos. And this Shmei HaGadol is praised, and as I said, Meshubach and fire forever in a way of Ein Sof. And that's why we say that the Eibishter is alone, he's the only thing, Yachid u'Meyuchad, and he's the Chei Ilamim. All this is only a level of Melech. Why? Because the way Hishtarshalos happens from something that's beyond to be able to come down to where we are, it's not shaykh in a way that one thing causes another, regular cause and effect, or ilah va'olol, that one thing emanates another. Because the thing that emanates, the thing that gives off the light, has to change in order to bring about the lower level. In other words, as we find by a Rav, a teacher who wants to give over to a student, he has to put himself into what he's giving over. And he can't think about other things at that time, as he was empty. In other words, he was free to think about other things before. But by the Eibishter, the way he is before the world's created, after the world's created, there's no change in the Eibishter. In other words, because the source of the world only comes from a level of Shmoi, a name which is called Malchus. And we say that the truth is that Kiniskav Shmoi Levada, even his name is totally beyond the realm and exalted over from the world. And therefore the revelation of the level of Shmoi is not through some regular cause-effect or emanation and what emanates from it, because if that's so, what would come is Ein Sof, because what caused it would be the same as the thing that's caused would be the same as what caused it. And therefore they'd be the same. And just as the Ilah, the higher level, would be Ein Sof, so what it emanated would also be Ein Sof. So rather, when it comes to Malchus, everything is created through tzimtzum, through a contraction, and what he calls there a dilug, a jump. That means that there's a nothingness in between. So what's before and what's after have no relationship whatsoever. So in other words, through holding back, and that's the way a melech, a king, always runs his country, is by not showing himself, by not being seen, by not having a relationship directly with the people. And that yira, that fear, that's what makes him, that allows him to control the country. And there becomes also a love through this. They respect and they love the king. So the same way, there's a tzimtzum. And from the tzimtzum, there comes a kav, a chut. There becomes a little ray of Malchus Ein Sof, and then many other tzimtzumim, until you could have later on, in Ishtalshalus, Ilah va'olol, you could have the regular evolvement of worlds. As it's known, the difference between Saiv and Mala, as he says. So he says, so this idea that the Eibishter draws himself down from the level of Shmei HaGadol to come down into Torah, that's called Yoshev Ha'osek b'Torah, that he sits down and involves himself in Torah. This is called Rinana D'Oraisa, the song of Torah. Why? Because Torah comes from the level of Chachma, but that means it comes out from Chachma. That's the revelation of Torah, which is a Chachma which we could understand. But the level of the light of Hashem that encloses itself, in other words, the level of Ur and Saf that comes on into Chachma Ilah, which that we call Chachma V'lei B'Chachma Yediyah, that we have no concept of what type of Chachma this is. That's a level we so call Taimei Torah, the notes, the tunes of Torah, the songs of Torah. And it says, Rinana D'Oraisa, the song of Torah. And he brings this is what's called Zarka Makav Shofar. So Zarka Makav Shofar is the trup, as the Svardim have for Kriya. And as he says, that the idea of trup, taimim, are just like letters, which is, as we know, that in the letters of Torah, there's 4 levels. There's Oisius, on top of that, there's Tagin, there's the crowns. Higher than that, there's the Nekudis, which is the vowelization. And then higher than that is the taimim, the notes, the tune, the trup. But each one represents a higher level. And the level of taimim, the trup, they represent the pleasure of the Eibishter that there is in Torah. And so, which is even higher than Chachma Ilah. And for sure, it's even higher than the written letters of Torah that come down from Chachma. And so he explains a little bit further, just as you have letters of speech, so too you have letters of thought. In other words, you have ways that you speak, you have ways when you're thinking, you have letters, you have words to what you're thinking, or letters. And the letters of the taimim is the meaning and the pleasure and the sweetness of the letters. And so this Tainug Elyon, which means that the enjoyment, the sweetness, the hana of the Eibishter, the pleasure of the Eibishter in himself that happens in Torah, as it says, V'aya etzle shashuyim, this comes down into the level of Chachma Ilah, and this is what brings, so to speak, the gili of the Eibishter in Torah, which is, when we're talking Chanukah, we talk about in Chanukah that Lashkicham Torah Secha, they wanted us to forget the Eibishter's Torah. So the Eibishter's Torah, that we feel the Eibishter in Torah. And not only just the Eibishter as a hiskalus of the Eibishter, but really we want the Eibishter himself and the Eibishter's pleasure in Torah. This is from the time, and this is in the time of Torah. Okay, and he brings also, this is what it says, Bishurun Melech, the word Bishurun, he says it's from the Lashon, it's from a language of shir, of a song. And so just as a song is like a circular thing, in other words, it doesn't end. It keeps on restarting again and going when you finish the niggin, the beginning starts again, etc. Same way, this level of taimim is the level of shacha of soiviv kolalmin, mamish, and this is in a level of, as we say, melech, as we say in the brachas, melech ha'olam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvaysav, and we make that bracha even on Torah. So this is the hamshacha, to draw down. This is one level of Chosson that we're drawing down from higher than Chachma. We're talking from the level of the pleasure, the tainug of the Eibishter, into Torah. This is one song of the Chosson that actually gets drawn down through when the Kallah, we said, it arouses the Chosson. But ultimately, this is one level of revelation of the Eibishter in Torah. So the Alter Rebbe explains that this is what he says now in Eis Gimel. This is Shir Hashirim Asher L'Shleima. So he explains here first what is a shir in general. A song in general, is a ratzeh and a shoiv, a yearning and a return, a yearning and a coming back to oneself, which is, he also says, a level of mati v'lei mati, something that reaches and doesn't reach, which means that there's a dual, like almost like a dance of going forward and coming back, and the shir is really in the whole thing together and it coming together. And he brings down from in the Torah here from Eitz Chaim, and as he connects us with that the level of mati and loy mati comes from the mouth of Adam Kadma, which he connects with the timing of before, because they're also in the level of Adam Kadma, and he says that in the Shikas pihu, which is level of P. But he says that Shir Hashirim, this means now this is a shir that it's a song that all songs get from. They all come from this song. In other words, and he explains, there's a shir that comes that ascends from below. In other words, that the level of Malchus, which is the source and creates all things, as we said before, Ma'ayin Liyesh, it goes up in a bittul to where it emanates from, and that happens through a song. In other words, again, a ratzei v'shoiv, it goes up and then it gets drawn back, etc. And actually, also the way it comes down into the lower worlds of Biyah, there's an ascension. There's the Olamus ascend at times, and they go up higher. And all these times are always through called a song, and it happens through a song. As we know, songs have notes that go up and they go down, and you have levels that rise and descend. And so there's an unlimited amount of aliyahs, an unlimited amount. And all this is called a shir. And that's what he says, called Bali Ashir, Yoitzim B'Shir, V'Nimshachim B'Shir, everything that is everything of song. And then I think in the other Mamorim that he even mentions there, Malachim and Neshamis, everything. They go up and down in unlimited amounts of levels, B'Shir. In other words, it's always with going up an aliyah, when they go up an aliyah, it's like a note that goes up. It's always with song. It's all called a song. And so all these shirim, all these songs that ascend, are called shira, Melashon Nikeva with a hey, feminine, which is a level of Kallah. And from this level of Kallah, you accomplish from Sameach Chosson, that you bring out the simcha of the Chosson. That, in other words, that through the Kallah and her level of shira, in the with a hey, in other words, a level of Kallah, you bring down this higher level of shir, this higher song, which is the masculine, the male song, which is a drawing down of Soiv Kolam from Mishmei Gadol, as we said before, the notes of Torah, the song of Torah, which is the pleasure of the Eibishter, that it comes down into Torah. And so this is the through the song of the Kallah Lamata, you draw down a higher song, which is the song of the timing of Torah, which comes down into Chachma. And he said, this is what it says, Asher l'shleima. In other words, the pasuk was Shir Hashirim Asher l'shleima. And shleima here means, from the word shalom, he says, which is similar to the idea that the Eibishter makes shalom between Michal, who's the angel of water, and Gavriel, who's the angel of fire, which are two opposites. In other words, that's what shalom is, bringing together two opposites. So the same way, how do you have these two opposites come together, which is from the ascending song and also the descending song? Is because the Eibishter, who's be'etzem totally, we said before, Kadosh Muvdal, and it's like a totally separate from the worlds, and these worlds are totally separate, and so to speak, in our eyes from him. So there should be that the Eibishter should come down into this world, in this tippa, so to speak, and to this nothingness that's before him. There has to be a pleasure, a purpose, a reason that there's a pleasure in doing this. And this is the idea of the song. And that's where the shalom comes from. The mashpia and the mekabel that get connected is all because of this tainug, of this pleasure that there is. And he says, that's why here the word is shleima, because shleima will have in it sai, it'll have in it both a masculine and a feminine term. Shleimai, as we know with the chaylam, because we say this word shleima means malach shah shalom shalai, the king that all peace is his, which that is the level of the masculine, the tipa, of the tipa's dacher. And then also you have shleima, which is spelled with a hey, which shows on lashon nekeva, on a feminine language, which is the level of the ascent that comes from below to above. And when you have both together, you have this supernal unification, and then you have, that's drawn down, a song to the songs. Okay, and he says, what causes all this? And he didn't explain yet what this is going to mean. What causes this great pleasure? So he says, this is the yashekeini and pihu. This is the kissing of the mouth, which he brings out that even this level of drawing down Shmei Gadol, the great name, in the tunes and in the notes of the truck, this is called ultimately neshikin, a kiss, which is, as a father wants to show great love to his son, his only son, and because of the great love that he's totally filled with love, with a fire, he can't bring it out in any way except through transforming it and to mitzamtzim it, to, so to speak, condense it. Through what? Through the hevel, through the breath of his mouth, and through a kiss. And even though it's a physical act, But yet, dafka through this, you bring out the greatest inner love that can't come out in any other way and not in any other words. So, and this is what he compares it to. So the same way this desire and this pleasure that the Eibishter has, that he should want to come down and be revealed, that the Ein Sof should be come down into the world and into Torah, is in a way that it jumps, in a way that it's totally beyond our world, beyond the Shtashalos, only with a tzimtzum, a great contraction. As we said, the Eibishter comes down, he sits down to be involved in Torah, etc. And he says, this is what it says, that by day, through that the Yidden, they are involved in studying Torah, they draw down kindness an entire day, which is they draw down godliness. And as it says here, it brings down that for the first 3 hours of the day, the Eibishter is involved in Torah. In the next 3 hours, he judges the world. In the last 3, he nourishes the world and sustains them, which all this is drawing down the light of the Eibishter, Ein Sof, in the sustenance of the world. And he says in the Chatzi Eagle here that this is the drawing down first into Chabad, which is the idea of Isaac B'Torah, and then the second hour's judging, that's in the levels of the Midas, and then the last 3 hours, which is that he nourishes the world, is a level, and that's a Chayid Yesod. And he says, but by night, so that's the time of Shira Imi, that's the time of the song of the Malachim, that's the ascent that happens, which is after that, which they didn't bring down the Eibishter in the day with Chesed. And here you have the same way, the Shira, the word Shira, as we said, the Shiri Imi Tfilei, that here it also, we have in this word also, Sai, we have the masculine and the feminine terms, because it also brings about this unification of the masculine and the feminine together. And that's also why you have here the word pihu, it doesn't say piv, because also this added hey is that you have again this duality of Zachar and Nekeva, of masculine and feminine together.